like, this is where the Aptera started. We started with this little Play-Doh model, and then we turned it into a NURBS model, and then we actually sent that model to NASA Langley, because at the time they had the world's largest computational fluid dynamics virtual wind tunnel.
Okay.
And the first check we wrote was a $17,000 check to NASA Langley to get them to do the aerodynamic study on the vehicle.
Wow.
And I remember we sent it off to them, and we waited for like a week, and then they sent us an email, and they were like, we seem to have some anomalous results. We'd like to get on a conference call and talk to you about it. And they got us on the phone, and they were like, this is the lowest aerodynamic drag shape we've seen on the road ever.
Oh, so the anomaly was that it was too good. In September, I flew out to San Diego for the Fully Charged Live show, and easily the biggest showstopper of the weekend was when Aptera revealed their newest design upgrade. They call it Gamma. It was a huge deal. There were hundreds of people crowding around, getting it on their cameras and stuff. I pretty much stayed like that the whole weekend. I was barely able to even get any video of it because there was just always a crowd around it. And in that crowd was CEO Chris Anthony. And I was hoping I would get a chance to talk to him, but he was just like being pulled in 50 directions all the time. It's kind of like going to a friend's wedding. You never really actually get to talk to them because they're all over the place. But anyway, at one point I was out to the side talking to somebody, and he actually took a minute and came over to me and said some really nice things about the channel, which was really cool. I had no idea that he watched it, but we only got to talk for just a minute before he got run off again. But it did give me enough time to get his contact info so I could set up this interview, because I've been wanting to get him on this podcast for a long time. Because Aptera it's such an interesting company. Their car, when fully spec'd out, assuming they can hit all their goals and everything, it will get 1,000 miles to a charge. And it'll have solar panels. It'll charge up to 40 miles or so a day, just sitting out in the sun. So if you have an average daily commute and you live in a sunny area, you might never have to fuel your car again. It's insane. It's designed to be hyper efficient and aerodynamic. In fact, the entire car has the same drag coefficient as the side mirror of a Ford F-150. The entire car, let me repeat that, has the same drag coefficient as the side mirror of a Ford F-150. That's how insane this car is. It's a really weird looking car. As he says in the interview, they took inspiration from sharks from their design, which I found fascinating. But it was made starting with the principle of making the most efficient car ever made. And that's the design that works for that. So, obviously we'll go into detail on all that in this conversation, but those are just a few of the reasons why I think this car is really cool, and I really want to see them succeed. But anyway, I want to thank Chris for taking the time to do this, and let's get to it. So here's my conversation with Chris Anthony. Enjoy. How are you holding up? I can imagine you're under a lot of stress these days.
Yeah,
Let's start there.
Startups are an interesting journey, no matter what. I think the biggest skill in a startup is being nimble and flexible. From design constraints to suppliers switching gears on you to funding not happening the way you want to. You just have to roll with the punches and figure out the most positive solution to a lot of these problems.
What's been the biggest headache so far? Pandemic aside, I guess that this alone is...
most of them are pandemic related, unfortunately. Right. You would think, we're coming out of this, but the supply chain lingers. Just being able to go and meet with some of our suppliers, especially in Asia, it's just impossible. You just can't do it. Yeah. So, it's starting to loosen up, and I think over the next 6 months, hopefully we start to see a lot of positive movement. But yeah, everything has been a challenge for the Aptera, because you have to figure out how to meet with a vendor, how to inspire them that, hey, this is worth supporting. We're not building in kind of automotive volumes, so 200, 400,000 vehicles a year. We have orders for 37,000 vehicles. I think that's a lot. I just went to the Padres game to see them play in the NLCS, and there was 38,000 people in the stadium, and I was like, holy shit, like this is how many people have ordered for the Aptera. This is quite a daunting task to fulfill these. But when you go to the automotive supply chain for some of these parts, they're like 40,000 so we're kind of playing in this lower tier, and I think we've been really good to find a lot of European suppliers that play in our volume
Okay.
regime. So I think it's been really great the last kind of 6 to 9 months that we've started to unfurl some people that they're willing to play in the 10 to 50,000 unit range, and it's been a real blessing to us to see those things come together. And
Yeah.
now we're close to a final Aptera production vehicle design. We're hoping to tidy that up by the end of the year, and then it's basically just how do we fund the tooling and equipment, this beautiful plant behind me, to start building the Aptera in 2023.
So, God, I have so many questions about just like the process of stamping these things out. I mean, I've only done like I've only dabbled a bit in like startups and I have a vitamin supplement company that I do on the side, and that's literally just like I order from a lab and they ship it over. But even that has had its own headaches, and it's just like the simplest thing in the world. And like I can't imagine what it's like dealing with all the parts that are involved in a car and all the vendors that are involved in making those parts and then getting in the same place and then assembling, a process to put it all together. Was there anything in your past that like prepared you for this, or is it just you're just figuring it out as you go?
Yeah,
or do you have people in place that have done it before and are like consulting and that kind of thing?
definitely the people in place have
Yeah.
helped a lot. Sandy Munro in particular.
Yeah.
But I have a weird kind of evolution as an entrepreneur. I mean, my first real company was in college. I was buying liquidated computer parts off of eBay, the early eBay. I had a 4-digit password to eBay. I was so impressed. I was so sad when I had to change that password.
Yeah.
But I was buying computer parts, and then I would build them into computers. And I put a little ad in the paper for a $599 computer, and all of a sudden I was selling hundreds and hundreds of computers at a time. So I was hiring college kids and developing the processes to take motherboards and put the memory on, and all the old
Yeah.
how old computers were built.
Roughly what year was this?
That was 99, 98.
Yeah. Okay.
So, eventually we became a Tiger Direct and Dell reseller because they were just building it cheaper than I could buy the parts for. But in the beginning, it's 20-ish parts to build a computer. So, when you have an assembly line and you're trying to build hundreds of them, you got 5 or 6 kids on an assembly line, and they're all just taking these parts and putting it together. And then, I evolved out of that into kind of the money game. So I was doing, IPO work and direct public offerings, and, running people's money for a while. Moved out to California, sold the computer business, moved out to California. So I think, having kind of the early manufacturing knowledge, kind of building stuff knowledge, and then trying to get into the money side knowledge really helped me launch some of my other companies, Epic Boats, building wakeboard boats, and then fishing boats, which probably in your area of Dallas, there's probably a lot of Epic center console fishing boats rolling around the lakes of Dallas. In Texas, we were the #1 center console brand in Texas for a long time.
Oh, cool.
But there was kind of 1,500 parts in the bill of materials for a boat. You'd be surprised at how complex some boats are.
Sure.
$80,000, $120,000 boats. For the Aptera, it's a 700 part bill of material. But with Sandy Munro's help, we've kind of condensed everything into subassemblies, and there's really only 6 subassemblies that build the whole Aptera. So there's a battery pack is kind of the base unit of the vehicle because it's the heaviest thing. You got a front suspension, a rear suspension, you got a body structure, you got an interior, you got closures on top of that, and then we add the solar as kind of an after effect. But because everything's built in these subassemblies, we can go to people and get the 150 parts that are in the front suspension subassembly and get it built all by one contract manufacturer and just shipped to us. So for us, Sandy Munro of Munro and Associates, he's in Detroit, lean manufacturing expert, does all the teardowns of popular electric vehicles. But they've helped companies like Cirrus Aircraft, go from building just a couple business jets a week to building several business jets a day. To help companies like Dodge, get their Ram pickup truck to be #1 in quality. They work with Maytag and NASA and Club Car and all sorts of brands to just really focus on lean manufacturing. And we went to him very early on in our evolution and said, Sandy, we don't want to make a really cool product and then get a bunch of orders and then try to put it into manufacture and then figure out how to the manufacturing of this vehicle. I don't know if you have to bleep out bad words in this.
We may bleep all. That's fine.
But once I've done it with several companies. My lithium battery company, we had an amazing product. We had tons and tons of orders, but then we put it into manufacturing. We're like, gosh, we're really not making as much money as we could on these battery packs because we don't have a focus on lean manufacturing and design for manufacturability. So we kind of, after we were in production for a year and a half, 2 years, went back and hired a company like Sandy Munro's company to help us design for manufacturability and put in the digital systems, data-driven manufacturing environment to control the design process, roll into product life management, roll into enterprise resource planning, roll into a manufacturing execution system, all these digital tools that you need in manufacturing now, which are really complex, really talented people to run them. But Sandy said, start with that. Don't make a product that has 700 parts that you have to have each part on the line and then put each part in the vehicle. Design it in subsystems, design it with as few parts as possible, design it to be super modular and easy to put together. And then your digital systems that manage that just become so much easier. So I think we're really an interesting case study for young companies where we've adopted all of these pretty expensive digital tools before we've even started manufacture. So we're virtually building Apteras in the computer and using all of our data-driven manufacturing tools to fully build out the vehicle, pull parts out of inventory, have it to the line, scan it on the line, record the value of the torque of the screw that you put in, save the serial number from the tires that you put on the vehicle. All those things already exist in our systems, and I would have loved to have had that in my other companies, but I just didn't have the advice of somebody like Sandy Munro. So it's been interesting, kind of putting all these brilliant tools together early on in our existence versus figuring out later, like, oh, we forgot this, or, oh, this cost twice as much as, we thought it would, or, oh, it takes 5 minutes to put on this part instead of the 2 minutes that we thought. So it's a lot of moving pieces for sure. And it's a whole, manufacturing science is like a whole segment in itself. How cool that stuff is, as Elon Musk would say, manufacturing hell. And it's true for a lot of things if you aren't well prepared for it. But we think we're better prepared than most, hopefully.
You gotta build the machine that builds the machine, I think is one of the things that he once said. I apologize if there's a lot of noise. My dogs have decided that this is the perfect time to have a battle royale in the house, and they're running back and forth.
They're just excited about solar mobility.
Like, this thing gets 1,000 miles. This might not be something you can answer, but you got Sandy on your team and everything, and he seems to be super pumped about it. I was there at Fully Charged. It was a friggin' madhouse around your car. I mean, we barely got to speak for like 3 minutes before you got pulled away again. But like, there it is. Yeah. What is it? Again, maybe you're too close and you can't even answer this, but what is it about this car and this company and this design and philosophy that gets everybody so excited? Because I will even confess that, like, okay, when the Cybertruck was first unveiled, I was still doing Our Ludicrous Future at the time, and I think we were talking about it, and the subject came up. It's like, yeah, it's cool, but like, some people don't want to be stared at everywhere they go, And I would say the same is true for the Aptera. I mean, people are going to stare at you in this car, but for some reason, I'm super interested in the Aptera, and not so much for the Cybertruck. Granted, I couldn't fit a Cybertruck in my garage, but still. Like, I'm super pumped about this, and like, seemed like at Fully Charged, everybody was all about it, and Sandy's all up about it and everything. So it's like, do you know what it is about this whole thing that gets people so interested?
I think it's a lot of different factors. I think one, we have a unique ethos. Any other product that you can think of probably started out with a minimum viable product analysis.
Right.
What do we need to make our thing to be accepted by the market, and especially in transportation. It needs to be a crossover SUV. It needs to cost $48,500. It needs to have 5 seats and 8 cup holders and all these things, and they benchmark against everybody else in the industry. We did not start there. We started with,
you don't wind up with a car like that by starting there. No.
we started with where does the energy go in transportation?
Yeah.
And if you want efficient transportation, what are the first principles engineering that you have to put forth to make that happen? And it all starts with aerodynamics. Most sedans or SUVs burn over 60% of their fuel at highway speeds, just pushing air out of the way.
Yeah.
So if you can make your vehicle aerodynamic, you instantly, almost double the fuel economy. Okay, what's the next biggest loss? Weight. It takes a lot of energy to deform a tire in every rotation in a big heavy vehicle. So make the vehicle lightweight. Get even better fuel economy. Oh, what about the drivetrain? Well, there's you only get 25 to 27% of the energy out of gasoline that you burn. The rest of the energy is wasted in heat and blow by. Get very little of the energy to the actual wheel. And even in electric drivetrains, some are only, sending 80% of the power to the wheels. We're much higher than that because we have these in-wheel motors and a trick silicon carbide inverter and all these things. But we send more power from the wall to your wheels. You put all that together and you get an equation that's like 350 miles per gallon equivalent. People hear that number and they're like, you would think like, what's the most efficient, vehicle out there? It's like 70 miles per gallon, maybe 80 miles per gallon. If you got 100 miles per gallon, like, holy shit, man, that's super efficient. 350 miles per gallon, like, it's a totally different thing. So I think, because we started from such kind of a pure place, and we didn't know that it would work, by the way. we didn't know that people would give a shit about efficiency. We had hoped that people would, and we had early conversations about, well, maybe we need to benchmark the Tesla, and maybe we need to benchmark the Nissan, and all these things. Like, I was like, no, we do not. We need to put out the most efficient transportation device ever, and I think people will love it. And within the first 2 weeks of us putting it out, we had like 4,000 orders. And, it's kind of like, okay, 1,000 orders, we can make a company out of that. 4,000 orders, now you get some economies of scale. 20,000 orders, all right, now this is big time.
Panic.
And now so I think, we came at it from a very pure perspective, and I think you can tell, we don't pander or craft a marketing message to people. We just tell our story. We have a communications team, not a marketing team. And we like to talk about the cool things we're doing, but it's not like market segmented where, we held a focus group and we're like, oh, we have to say these words to inspire these people to buy our vehicle. That's just not us. The Aptera is a very cool thing for many, many people. And just as many people hate it. We think that that's a good thing. We think that, there's some people that will they see 3 wheels and they're like, nope, not me. Looks like a spaceship. Nope, I'm out. But there's other people that, maybe they're pilots or engineers and they go, yes, aerodynamics. I get it. Totally get it. Bleeding edge engineering to make things lightweight, generative artificial intelligent design to lower the weight of your metal parts. Like I'm all in. There's other people that, are on the environmental side and they say the least impact to the environment. You use a quarter of the materials in this vehicle to make the device in the first place. So a quarter of the cobalt, a quarter of the aluminum, a quarter of the rare earth materials. The drivetrain is a quarter of the size, all these things. So I start out at a much better point for the environment, and I'm getting 350 miles per gallon equivalent. So I'm doing good for the environment on the other side. Add in solar and you have a zero fuel cost transportation device. It charges back 40 miles a day. So if you're paying $5,000-6,000 a year in fuel cost, and you can get something that is free, that's a compelling economic case. So I think there's people on the environmental side. Then there's the people that just want to be unique. And it's probably our biggest customer segment, of people that have ordered the ask questions. They just love that it is so different than anything else out there. It's not an SUV.
Some people do want to be stared at.
Some people do. Well, not so much that, but they, it's like the limited edition iPhone. It's red, it's cool. It's like, they don't want the thing that everybody else has. And the Aptera is the thing that nobody else has. The first 10,000 people that drive this thing home will be the most unique thing in their neighborhood, hands down.
As always, this episode is supported by CuriosityStream. So we're talking about designing an electric car in this episode, electrifying the world to get off fossil fuels and all that. Well, maybe you want to know more about this whole electricity thing that maybe you've heard of it, electricity. But if you do want to hear more about the story of electricity in our modern world, you might want to check out Juice, How Electricity Explains the World, right there on CuriosityStream. Of course, it's just one of thousands of documentary titles from award-winning filmmakers from all around the world on subjects as wide-ranging as astronomy, history, space travel, art, food, the list keeps going, as well as CuriosityStream original series from the likes of Nick Uhouse and other science communicators. It's just the best streaming platform for documentaries on the planet. Let's just put it that way. And even better is that when you sign up at curiositystream.com/JoeScottPod, you'll get access to Nebula. That's a streaming service I'm a part of, as well as many of your other favorite science YouTubers. It's pretty much just a curated service that streams all your favorite YouTubers ad-free. And you can also see things earlier than everybody else, so you wouldn't be hearing this ad if you were watching it on Nebula. This ad I'm doing right now. It'd be out. So yeah. It's also got original series that you can't find anywhere else, like my Mysteries of the Human Body series and my Forgotten Atrocities series. Plus, they just added Nebula classes, so there's always something new going on there. It's a great little service, and I'm proud to be a part of it. So yeah, again, if you want to get both streaming services, you can go to curiositystream.com/JoeScottPod. You'll get them both for 26% off, making a grand total of $14.79 for an entire year for 2 streaming services. I mean, literally with just that, you'll never run out of interesting stuff to watch. So one more time, go check it out. It's curiositystream.com/JoeScottPod. And thanks to CuriosityStream for supporting this episode. Now back to Matt.
When they go to the Starbucks, when they go to get, there's just nothing else like it. And I think that the uniqueness of the Aptera is something that draws in, a lot of our fans too. So I would say those are the biggest kind of categories. They love the bleeding edge science. They love that it, has environmental purity and environmental benefits, or they just want to be terribly unique. And this is that.
Yeah. I saw somebody, I think there's a couple of YouTube channels that are like Aptera Motors Owners Club or something like that, but
YouTube channels covering Aptera now.
Yeah, full YouTube channels, absolutely. I think it was on one of those, but he was talking about why it's a great car. It's a great car for rural people. And living in Texas, that's one of the draws that I have toward it, because my parents live out in West Texas, and it's kind of funny because my mom lives further away, but she's closer to a highway where I can charge along the way with my Model 3. My dad isn't as far away, but there's just no charging stations anywhere near him. So getting out there and back can be a bit hairy sometimes, even in the long range Model 3. So I was already kind of thinking that before I saw that video, but I was like, I think that might be a good market for it, is people who want to go electric, but they just live in a place where it's kind of a charging desert, and there's not really any place to charge up their Rivian or something like that, and also the price point is a lot more reasonable than a lot of the really long range EVs right now. So I can see it being popular in places like that. And I was curious if you heard anything else, any feedback from people in areas like that.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are driven to the idea and kind of the culmination of everything we do, because it really offers freedom. If you can go 600 to 1,000 miles on a charge, it changes the way you think about electric transportation. It's just not as limiting as some of the other electric vehicles out there. When you can, go 200 miles to your favorite camping site, and you can camp for a week, and you can actually come home with more energy in your vehicle than you left with. It kind of changes your perception about how, transportation works for you. This is really the first vehicle that creates its own fuel. So, not just for kind of range limitations, but also how your energy goes into getting you around is really changed by, how this vehicle works and functions. And I think, a lot of people that are, remote or want to be more independent really see the benefits of a vehicle that with a 110 extension cord can charge 150 miles overnight, because it charges so fast because it uses such little energy per mile. Mm-hmm. So you don't have to worry about, going to grandma's house. I went to grandma's house. I stayed 3 days. She lives 500 miles away. She doesn't have a charger or any bullshit like that. She has an extension cord. I let it charge while I was there, and I got 600 miles to drive back home. That really changes kind of, the flexibility of your transportation, and to have it all come with zero fuel cost compared to combustion engines is just an amazing, amazing attribute. So we hope that a lot of people, we know that a lot of people that have orders for the Aptera also have orders for Cybertrucks and Model 3s and other things in their garage. But we hope that we're a real solution for them to take those trips in a more energy conscious way, a more environmentally friendly way, and a way that doesn't restrict them as much, give them more freedom in their transportation and the options for it. So
yeah, I had a question when I was looking at it, and I hope you don't mind me asking because it's well, the engines are in the wheel, or the motor's in the wheel, right?
yes, yeah.
Okay, so if somebody hits a curb too hard, or it has a little accident, where do you get that service? Is that part of like your building out, is finding service stations or creating customer service centers and stuff?
Animal motors are unique. It does add a little extra weight to your wheel.
Sure.
But the wheel is separate, so that the wheel and tire are separate, just like they are in any other vehicle. So you unbolt them, you take it off. You can have your tire rotated or changed. You can go to Discount Tire and they can put a new tire on it, type thing. So it's not limiting in the fact of like servicing it or how it works. We have done a lot of testing, like curb strike testing and pothole testing and stuff like that. And the motor itself is very, very robust. It's as robust as the suspension components on kind of any other vehicle. So, if you hit, a 6-inch pothole at 40 miles an hour in your BMW, you may expect some damage. It's kind of similar to this. There are instances where, hey, you're going to damage stuff, but we think that other suspension components in our vehicle, are going to fail before we have a problem with the wheel motor itself or anything.
Yeah. Does it have the ability to kind of go up and down a little bit for rougher terrain? I noticed that there's one part of it that's pretty low to the ground.
We have an off-road package which raises the wheel pants to give the wheels a little more egress. Also kicks up the rear a little, but it's kind of low on the engineering priorities. So we haven't put a lot of effort into it. We're concentrating on just get the production vehicle done and ready and get it into production as quick as possible.
I'm curious, when you were talking about that you had a boat company, did your experience with hydrodynamics help with the aerodynamics of the car?
Yeah, when I first started,
that makes sense.
It does make sense. I had a friend that had an inboard outboard boat, and we started wakeboarding here in Mission Bay. I just thought it was an awesome thing. Like, oh shit, you jump off the wake in the back and do tricks in the air. Like, oh man, this is really cool.
Yeah.
And I started to get a little good at it, and I felt good enough to go to a competition. And I went to a competition out in the desert on the Colorado River, and we went behind a ski boat that was like weighed down to be more of a wakeboard boat. And the wake was, I was doing tricks that I could have never dreamed of on this other boat. And the wake was so crisp and clean. And, I felt like I was, Michael Jordan of wakeboarding. I was just, flying through the air. And I was like, what is so different about this ski boat that was weighed down versus my friend's inboard outboard boat? And it really was the hull design. So I started, looking at different hull designs. Why is a Malibu better than a Mastercraft or better than a Centurion or all these boats? So I basically went out and I measured all the boat holes out there. And back in those days, this was 2001-ish. Back in those days, they didn't really have computational fluid dynamics the way they have today. It was panel code. So you'd kind of take like a 2D section through any fluid moving, and it was kind of akin to the very early finite element analysis. But I was doing very early panel code with the freeware you could get on the internet to characterize these wakeboard boats. And I was getting on forums and I was like, I think if you change the hull like this, you could actually play with Bernoulli's principles of fluid pressure. The faster the fluid moves, the lower the pressure, and you could actually suck a boat down into the water and it would actually throw a really big wake. And I got on these forums and there was these international sailboat guys and they're like, that's a quick way to have your boat at the bottom of the bay.
I was about to say, like, how far down does it go?
and I would like post pictures of the fluid dynamics I was doing. I was like, no, it's only like 1,800 pounds of downforce, and like I think this could work. And there was just the internet was not kind to my early boating design aspirations. They were just crucified me, but I didn't listen.
The
And
internet?
I said,
That
I
doesn't
think
sound
this
right.
worked. So I took that early panel code and I made my first epic boat. And it really was an exercise in better computational fluid dynamics and the understanding of how boat hulls interact with the water and how big the wave can be out the back so you can wakeboard better. And we made, a really cool wakeboard boat. And I made one and I took it out and I had some pro wakeboarder friends and they were like, holy shit, like this thing is, this is the best boat we've ever ridden on, like by a mile. Like you need to start a company around this. So then I did start a company around that. And it was really through Epic when I started playing with the composites. I got into resin infused composites, which makes really lightweight composite structures really strong. Then I met Steve Fambro in San Diego here through a mutual friend. Steve was starting to ideate Aptera, and he was trying to build it out of faceted panel composites and glue them together like in a very angular format, and then he's going to put like an aerodynamic shell over it, and then he was ordering parts to his work because back then UPS wouldn't deliver to your house. That's how old we are. But he was having those composite things delivered to work, and his work friend knew me, and she was like, oh, you have to meet this boat guy. He's doing really cool composite stuff and you're doing stuff on the car. So that's how Steve and I met, was through the composites that I developed for the boat. And I told Steve, I was like, no, you don't want to do this faceted panel thing. You want to build it like a monocoque structure, like a Formula One car or a Cirrus aircraft. You want to, you want a cocoon around the passengers, and then you want that to carry all the loads from the suspension and all that stuff. And he said, you're right. And then we kind of held hands and started, and he hadn't really conceived of computational fluid dynamics when I met him. So the first thing we did was we made a NURBS model of the Aptera shape. And I remember we hired a guy to do it, and to inform him on how we thought the shape should be, we made a little Play-Doh model and we put it on a cake turner. We took pictures of it turning around. And it was this little shit turd of a red clay, Play-Doh model that I still have pictures of. I was like, this is where the Aptera started. We started with this little Play-Doh model, and then we turned it into a NURBS model. And then we actually sent that model to NASA Langley, because at the time they had the world's largest computational fluid dynamics virtual wind tunnel. And we the first check we wrote was a $17,000 check to NASA Langley to get them to do the aerodynamic study on the vehicle. And I remember we sent it off to them, and we waited for like a week, and then they sent us an email, and they were like, we seem to have some anomalous results. We'd like to get on a conference call and talk to you about it. And they got us on the phone, and they were like, this is the lowest aerodynamic drag shape we've seen on the road ever.
Oh, so the anomaly was that it was too good.
The anomaly was that it was too good. And then we had to explain to the NASA engineers, what ground effect was and what we were doing to actually defeat that. And kind of light bulbs went off. They were used to designing missiles and airplanes and stuff that were high in the air. But when you get close to the ground, the problem is you always have this high pressure zone in front of whatever you're pushing on the ground. You got to figure out what to do with that high pressure zone. So we figured out that, just like my boat, if you can speed up the air to the rear of the vehicle, that's why the Aptera has kind of a hump in its back, is we actually pull the air from the front of the vehicle to the back of the vehicle. And we speed up the air, we lower the pressure, so it's like a vacuum to the back of the vehicle. And we actually suck the high pressure zone out of the front of the vehicle, and it makes for a very, very smooth aerodynamic profile. We found out years later that actually sharks, when they swim close to the seafloor, they actually put a hump in their back because water's 1,000 times more viscous than air. So fish find out very quickly how hard it is to swim close to the seafloor. So they put a hump in their back, millions of years ago, and learned this lesson. But it was really interesting to have 6 NASA engineers on the phone. I can't imagine how much that we got our money's worth. We got our $17,000 worth because these guys, we pontificated on the phone, for 90 minutes with them, and they were just scratching their heads, and they were like, I guess the results are right. So you guys have the most aerodynamic thing we've ever seen.
Wow, that's crazy.
So and that's what kind of got the company funded was, we have this report from NASA that says this is the most aerodynamic thing ever. And then we went out and raised some money to.
It's a good sales pitch for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. NASA thought their stuff was broken. This was so good. It's only been in the most recent part of my life that I've started to kind of somewhat understand aerodynamics, and especially like flight and stuff like that. The idea of drag, I never understood drag because I was like, okay, so it creates a vacuum and that pull, like, why would a vacuum pull? There's nothing there. I wasn't even though I'm a science communicator now, I was not a science major or anything like that. But I had to I had to frame flight like an airplane as if it was like a hydrofoil in water. Like I had to think of air as water basically. It's just like mini water. It's light water. And the
It's in the particle dynamics, it's just 1,000 times more particles in water than air. So they
yeah,
both act the same,
yeah,
except water reacts 1,000 times quicker because there's so many more molecules packed together to act on a surface. So the skin drag and laminar flow and stuff is just so much more important in hydrodynamics than aerodynamics. But
yeah,
it's still, you know, as I said, 60% of your fuel at highway speeds is just pushing air out of the way in a typical vehicle. So, you know, it's important when you start to travel really fast.
yeah,
Those molecules of air hitting your vehicle, it slows it down, and it takes energy to move them out of the way.
yeah, yeah. Have you heard about this? I did a video about it a while back, but it's been probably at least a year. It was the Solera 500L, I think is what it was called. It's a plane that uses laminar flow. It like has a tapered end, or it's a weirdly shaped plane, but it uses laminar flow to get more efficiency and stuff.
Yeah, a lot of planes. You know, you'll the Pilates jet, and you know, there's lots of kind of planes that use these principles because it takes so much energy to push an airplane. I mean, you're having
Yeah,
to lift the whole time, especially on takeoff. So the more you can do aerodynamically to get the plane in the air, and obviously in steady state, you know, 200 knots or whatever you're flying at, it's
yeah,
crucially important if you want to
yeah.
cut. I don't know if you remember, you know, 12 years ago, 15 years ago, no planes had winglets at the end. So you took a Southwest flight or whatever flight, and you look out on the wing, and the wing is just straight, just
Yeah.
goes straight. Now everybody has these winglets that kick up on the end of the, and they found that, you know, you get like 6% better fuel economy if you can stop the air just spilling off the end of the wings.
Oh, okay.
You know, one you know, company found this, and they were like, oh shit, you know, 6% better fuel economy. So now all the planes that you fly on have these winglets
Hmm.
at the end, kind of kick up and stop the air jetting off the end of the wings.
So in the back of the Aptera, it's horizontal. Why not vertical? Why does horizontal serve a better purpose than vertical?
Well, you know, really what you want to
I'm
do is
asking
you want
really dumb questions here.
you want the air to tip over. So you know, when in an airplane wing, you want it to be kind of neutral until you do something to change that, right?
Yeah.
You know, you extend the running profile so you can speed up air on one surface and create lift or drag. You know, with ours, we want it to be kind of neutral, so we want the air to come back to a neutral. And if we were
Mm-hmm.
in free space, if we were up in the air, it would just be a very smooth, very symmetrical profile, top to bottom. It'd be fat and then go to skinny, and you'd want it to trail off as long as you could. You know,
Yeah.
100 feet if you could. But if you're close to the ground, it really changes, you know, how the pressures affect you because of that high pressure in the front. So instead of us being a nice symmetrical, it's angled up, and it's fatter in the front, and then kind of has a hump in the back, and then goes to the tail. So
Gotcha.
it's a different profile than like a wing or a NACA foil. NACA was a predecessor to NASA,
Yeah.
and NACA did a lot of work in just, you know, what is aerodynamics and that's why they call them a NACA duct on race cars, where you suck in air.
Mm-hmm.
Those things, it was designed by NACA before NASA
Mm-hmm.
existed. But yeah, we would be a symmetrical, smooth foil if we were up in the air, but because we're close to the ground, we look a lot different. And really, if you kick the tail up too much, you create downforce. Because you've got lots of pressure coming on the tail. If you have it down too much, you create lift. You're
That's
putting
what a
pressure
spoiler is basically.
Yeah. So
Keeps
so
it.
we try to be as neutral as possible. We don't want any lift or any downforce. There's
Mm,
a little bit of downforce on the Aptera, just intrinsic to any kind of
yeah.
vehicle traveling on the ground. But we try to keep it as neutral as possible. So we actually, in 2 versions ago, in the alpha version of the Aptera, there's 4 different versions now: alpha, beta, gamma, delta. We're finishing up our delta design now, which is pre-production. But the alpha version actually had a tail that was kind of 6 inches thick in the back. And we actually stretched the tail of the vehicle another 4 inches and slimmed it down to only a 4-inch profile at the tail ends, and that actually increased our aerodynamics by like 3% just by making the change in the tail. So how things kind of trail off when it comes to aerodynamics is super important.
It's really interesting. And is my thinking on that right, that like when you have a more blunt end, it creates a vacuum behind it, and that's what drag is?
Well, there's two things. One is the force of the molecules hitting the thing, but the second is the trailing effect. Because you have such a blunt object, yeah, you're creating kind of a vacuum that can't escape itself. Okay. So that's why you end up with shit on the back of your SUV all the time. You get this recirculating zone on the back of your SUV. Why is the back of my truck always dirty? Well, it's because it's a low pressure zone that's creating a vacuum that sucks all the dirt back to your vehicle. And but it's more the molecules hitting the front of the pad. So if you're driving a brick down the freeway, it's really everything that's hitting the front of the vehicle. If you have a really blunt face, but you can taper it off at the back really smoothly, that would help. Because then you don't have this recirculation zone in the back. But in general, it's mostly the punching power going through the.
That's where all the grasshoppers and bugs end up and stuff.
Oh, interesting note about the Aptera. I remember years ago, and we just took the Aptera out to the test track. But the Aptera, because it has such great laminar flow, bugs just go on a little roller coaster ride over the Aptera.
Oh, nice.
The trailing SUV that we had to watch the Aptera while it's doing the test, just covered in bugs, bug storm, bug hysteria, and then we pull over the Aptera after 2 days of testing, and there's 2 bugs on the very tip of the nose that have been squished, but everything else it just flies over. So it's interesting. You don't get dirty windshields, you don't get bugs.
Another reason somebody from Texas would want an Aptera, because on a road trip out here, it's just you're covered. You got to take it to the car wash and scrap the bug guts off it's terrible. Every time you fill up your car with gas, you got to scrape all the grasshopper brains off of your windshield.
You can just form the cricket bars,
Yeah. Yeah. Have you had any of those?
Yeah, it's interesting what's going on in the world of eco foods.
Yeah.
It's a shame, that so much of our food takes so many resources to grow. I mean, look at beef. I mean, beef takes so much water. Beef is just, cows are a horrible converter of biomass into the meat that you eat.
Yeah.
You go down the scale from cows to pigs to chicken to fish. If you want the best converter of biomass, it's fish. They're very good at taking what they input and turning it into the actual meat you eat. So, it's cricket bars are an interesting aside for sure.
I tried one time early on in my channel. I was like, watch me eat a cricket bar. So I did, and it tasted fine. I mean, it's just powder, but I think it maybe had figs in it or something. So there were little fibrous looking things. And of course, in my mind, it was a cricket leg. I got cricket leg stuck in my teeth and stuff, but I'm sure it was fine. I'm a big proponent of that. It sounds weird, but it's protein. It's good protein, and it's like you just said, it's not a
big problem for the planet, of course, is people come up the income scale. They eat more protein. And the protein that we eat is just horrible for the environment. Vegetables are one thing, but as soon as you go over to the beef side, to the chicken side, to the pork side, it's just a huge amount more environmental impact. And you see countries struggling with it, especially in Asia, hugely growing populations, eating a lot more protein now. How do you kind of create the feedstock for those things in an environmentally friendly manner? There's been a lot of great progress on kind of the simulated beef stuff, but all the reports I've read is that's even worse for the environment, because it takes energy to make the things that it takes to make fake meat than it does to actually just have the meat. So, we hope that through science we'll solve these problems. And just like, efficiency in transportation, we're working with bleeding edge science to solve that problem. And I'm sure we'll come up with solutions for protein for the masses eventually.
Yeah. Didn't expect this conversation to go there, but that's cool. Are you a vegetarian or a vegan or anything like that?
I'm not. My wife and I watched a documentary on factory farming years ago, and I don't know if you know how cute baby cows are, but they're cute.
Yes. Yes.
So when you get farming on a massive scale, you know, have 200,000 cows on a farm, a lot of cows die a day.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, after my wife saw the stack of little baby cows, you know, at the end of the day, one of those, she's like, we're not eating beef anymore. And she's the one that buys the food. So we didn't eat beef for a couple of years now. Now we've gone back. We have tacos once a week
Yeah.
with beef, and then everything else is fish and chicken. But
I tend to stick with the fish and chicken. We usually get salmon and I eat that. I've kind of gotten to where it's not so much an environmental thing, but I've been doing the intermittent fasting thing, and I've gotten to
oh,
where I usually only eat like one meal a day.
yeah, eating dinner is good. I've been doing that for a while. I was Steve and I did an interview on Jay Leno. And we started the interview. He's like, "Hey, it looks like you haven't been missing any meals lately." I was like, "God damn it, Jay Leno."
Got called out by Jay Leno, and
so I was like, I guess I'm getting too tubby to be like this anymore. So just for the camera, I decided to come up. But yeah, a big part of it was just stop eating so late, and I would eat
yeah.
2 in the morning. So you know that was rough. So one meal a day, I think, is a good policy. We are definitely not creatures that evolved to have 3 meals a day. It's just not a thing.
I've landed on that. I have a feeling that was marketing. I have a feeling somewhere along the way, some food company, some giant food conglomerate was like, eat 3 squares a day, and that'll make you grow up big and strong, and the bullies won't pick on you anymore, you know. And then we all just kind of like, okay, but I agree. I don't think we're actually designed for that.
It was the breakfast cartel, I think, that really.
And it worked. It worked so well. I love my breakfast. That's the one thing
you,
about the intermittent fasting I don't like is I love my breakfast, and I don't get to have it.
I also got on a kick for a while, but just allowing your digestive system like time to process is a good thing. I think you know, a lot of people have trouble with that, but you know, every once in a while, take a couple days off of food. You know, it takes about 2 days for you to flow everything through your gut. So you can take 2 days off a couple times a year, even. You know, it really helps your gut health, and I think a lot of people have problems with their gut health that they don't really realize. You know, I got in this molecule, which may be interesting for people to research, but NMN, nicotinamide mononucleotide. But it's a precursor
right
to.
here.
Oh,
Yep.
there we go, like mines. But yeah, I found reading research studies and stuff. It may be hard to argue that it really has longevity benefits, though I buy into the logic. But a lot of people are reporting like gut health improvement because basically it's your gut and just sits there. So I think, you know, I've seen a lot of great research on that being able to help your gut health. So intermittent fasting and, you know, maybe some molecules like NMN, I think could do good for a lot of people if they knew about it.
Yeah, and like usually whenever I bring it up, people are like, "Oh my God, aren't you hungry all the time?" And I'm kind of like, "Well, yeah, sometimes
It's okay to be hungry.
it's okay.
You know?
You get over it; it goes away." And is it the hormone ghrelin that your body produces that makes you feel hungry? It's like the more you go without, like the more you kind of push through the hunger, your body kind of stops producing that ghrelin so much. So like after a couple of days, you're not really hungry anymore. It's just like
I found that I ate most of the time because other people were eating, not because I wanted to eat.
yeah.
The other people were eating. It said, you know, okay, it's eating time.
Yeah.
What I was hungry is, you know, okay. So I was definitely notorious. You know, one of the reasons I got so big was because I worked so late, and the easiest thing to kind of keep you going is that Dr. Pepper. You know, in Texas,
Oh my God,
that
yeah.
Dr. Pepper deal, man, it'll get you good.
Uh,
So
I
but,
grew
you know,
up I grew up drinking Dr. Pepper, and I cannot drink them anymore. I don't know when I got off that wagon, but now it's just like, oh, it's just too much. It was like 23 flavors. It's just too many flavors. My mouth can't take it.
when people try it for the first time, like, oh God, what? Why do you drink this?
I guess it does kind of like rope you in though. Like once you get used to the taste, it's like, this is the best thing ever. And I think sugar in general does that, but
Tastes so good when it hits my lips.
yeah.
I was in college, and I got kind of serious about sports. I played football and track in college. All right, I got to, you know, buckle down for football. So I was drinking like two liters a day of Coke. So I kind of quit Coke in college, and I kind of made myself hate it. Was the way I did it. And you know, then I didn't drink any soda for years and years. And then some party I went to, they're like, "Here, Dr. Pepper and whatever," and I was like, "Oh, Dr. Pepper, this is this is like Coke but better." Oh man. this party started.
Well, of course, in the South, we call everything Coke.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm going to get a Coke. What kind of Coke, Dr. Pepper? Doesn't make much
Yeah.
sense.
The amount of sugar in those things, though lately the kick has been Celsius. I don't know if you've seen these guys.
Yeah.
200 milligrams of caffeine doesn't have any real sugar. It has sucralose, which I think is a whole nother battle that we're going to have to fight as a society. I'd much rather see real sugar than sucralose. But but the caffeine and like other stuff they put in here, guarine and it's it gets you going, man. I kind of went off the Dr. Pepper caffeine, which is only like 40 or 50 milligrams of caffeine per can, and now I'm drinking this shit, which is 200 milligrams. And so I don't know if I've made it any better on the caffeine side.
Yeah. So I drink usually about 2 cups of coffee. That is my one real addiction. If I don't have my coffee in the morning, I'll get a headache usually. That's not good, but that's where I am now.
Definitely means definitely your body. It definitely means you're addicted. Your
I know. I know. But this is okay. So I work out on Mondays and Wednesdays, and I have that like pre-workout drink.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize how much of that was just caffeine.
Yeah.
It's like 3 cups of coffee worth of caffeine. I had no idea. So I'm like having coffee and then drinking that and then another coffee. So it's like 5 or 6 cups of coffee worth of caffeine. And that makes me feel normal. So that's not good. But it should make me all...
It doesn't give you energy. It just tells your body, not to feel tired, right?
Yeah.
So it's
it kind of turns off that signal.
For sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that, the way we interact with food is, a big part of the, way we interact with our environment, right? So the more responsible we can be with our calories and, the better we can be for the planet and the better we can be for lots of stuff. So intermittent fasting is a good one. Keeps you in shape. Let your body know that everything's not so fucking easy.
Yeah. It makes it a little bit uncomfortable. Are you familiar with the Dr. Sinclair and the stuff he's doing at the Harvard lab for longevity and stuff? Yeah. I need to try to get him on this podcast. I've reached out, but it hasn't worked out yet. But yeah, I read his lifespan book, and that was basically the conceit of it. It's like, just make yourself uncomfortable. Cold showers, don't eat, exercise a lot. It's just like, you'll live a long time, but you'll be uncomfortable the whole time.
It's weird today that we kind of all live very comfortable lives. And if you flash back even 150 years ago, which is not a lot of generations ago, there was no concept of comfort.
Yeah.
You slept on the ground.
Yeah.
Only like, the top 0.1%, super wealthy people living in the castle had any idea of, what it is to like, sit in a lounge chair. Sit, like a lumbar support. Yeah. Like it was just,
that was just a servant that you stuffed back there.
Yeah. Like temperature control, like, just in this facility, we live in San Diego, perfect weather all year round. But oh my gosh, it's 50 degrees. People can't function, anymore. Put on a sweater. Like 50 degrees is not the end of the world. Oh God, it's 90 degrees outside. I'm dying of heat. That is, it's crazy to think that 150 years ago there was no concept of temperature control or comfort or like any of that. You were just trogging along trying to get your next calorie so you didn't die.
Yeah.
Hopefully you'll be able to procreate and see something live on past you. But that was just the game. So.
I did a video not too long ago about passive housing and passive building. And like, I kind of started it by talking about the way, people lived in the Middle East in desert conditions and hot places long before we had air conditioning, and they survived. They found ways to get by with like evaporative cooling and water and stuff like that. And it's kind of like, now everything is just brute force, throw as much electricity as possible at it to cool yourself off. And it's like, there's other ways of doing it. We just kind of forgot about all of it. We just kind of said, we got this now. Let's put this new high energy technology in there. And
civil engineering is just a whole nother segment that I just find so fascinating. And, in California, especially, we have all these tilt up buildings. It's more expensive to buy a window that opens than it is to buy a window that doesn't open. So in Southern California here, we have all these big buildings that, just can't open up to get any fresh air in. So you're constantly, running the climate control and trying to figure out how to keep these buildings cool or hot, when for most of the time you just open up the damn window and it would be 72 degrees and everybody would be happy. So, it's frustrating. A big problem for Asia now is their energy crisis, is mostly caused by air conditioning.
Yeah.
Kind of like the protein scenario. As people get more wealth, they want more protein. As people get more wealth and move up the economic ladder, they want air conditioning.
Mm-hmm.
And air conditioning is, it's like a third of the energy profile in a lot of these Asian countries, and they haven't been able to ramp up as fast as their people are buying air conditioners. It's a very interesting problem that I think could be solved with a lot of old world technologies, but that's the way our capitalist society works, which is great in some respects and horrible in others, is that the people that sell the buildings don't give a shit about the long-term cost of, what's going on down the pipe. So they're not going to pay $200 extra per window to have, a more flexible environment for people to control the temperature. They're going to tilt up the walls and put in the cheapest windows and sell it as quick as they can so they can move on to the next deal, right? So.
Yeah. This episode is also brought to you by Canker Boy. So this might be a little personal, maybe a little uncomfortable to talk about, but some people, you might be one of them, get canker sores. Not to be confused with cold sores or fever blisters, those things that cluster around your lips. That's something else. That's herpes simplex. Canker sores are on the inside of your mouth. They're round, they're red, and they make eating an orange feel like you stabbed yourself in the head with a lightsaber. They're super painful, and they can swell up to the point that you can't even talk sometimes. Most of you probably don't get them regularly, but for those who do, I think you know what I'm talking about. So this is something I've suffered with my whole life. It's a family thing, but along the way, I did stumble across a solution that actually helps, and that's called Canker Boy. It's a vitamin supplement that you take once a day, and it helps keep down your body's overproduction of an inflammatory cytokine that's the root cause of these recurring canker sores. It's been on the market for about 5 years now. There's a ton of positive testimonials on Amazon. Everybody's different, so your results may vary, but most people do experience a reduction in the number and severity of their ulcers within 2 to 6 weeks. So if you're one of the poor souls who deal with recurring canker sores, it can't hurt to give it a try. Just go to cankerboy.com, that's cankerboy.com. There you'll find a link to buy it on Amazon, but we also have it as a subscription, and if you sign up using the code CONVERSATIONS, you'll get 60% off your first 2 months supply. There's also plenty more information there if you still have questions. So once again, it's cankerboy.com. Go check it out and live life pain-free. Now back to the show. Yeah, my grandparents used to have some really old houses in the town that they lived in, and they were kind of those pass-through houses where like you just open certain windows and doors and the air would just flow through. Like you could open from different angles, so whichever direction the wind is flowing, you could open that side of the house and it would just flow through. And it's right here in the middle of Texas, but it was comfortable, I'm sure at certain times of the year it was not uncomfortable or it's not comfortable, but I don't know. I just find that interesting that we have all this, like all these design principles that we've sort of lost over time to newer and better technologies that are just really more energy intensive.
We're so smart that we're dumb in many ways.
Yeah. Yeah. So the next Aptera will be run by hamsters in a wheel and horses and stuff, right?
Yeah.
Actually, so you're working on Delta.
Yep.
You say you've already kind of got it designed out, but you haven't built it yet. Was that what you were saying a second ago?
So we're hoping to finish the design by the end of the year. The Gamma that we introduced that you saw at fully charged, we consider kind of an 80% production contented vehicle. But we actually designed that like 8-9 months ago, but then we had to build it to show fully charged. So since then, we've been working on the production design, which has largely been an effort of working with suppliers. So suppliers, what part can you provide us? We would love the part to look like this. And they'd come back and they're like, well, it doesn't look like that. It looks like this. And it has the brackets in different locations. Yeah. And then we had to figure out with a supplier, okay, do we pay for you to redesign that part to be more like what we want? Or do we just use it as is and figure out how to handle on our side? So really the last, kind of 6-9 months for us has been a supply chain effort of figuring out, okay, what are the production parts and how do they all come together? And, you have to have system-wide discussions, and there's cost implications too. So you can't have the vehicle get too expensive and stuff like that. We hope to have a pin in all that by the end of the year. We're very close now. We've been doing kind of final design reviews on a lot of different systems, and it's really cool to see such a massive kind of undertaking. We 100 engineers and 70-80 contractors out of the company, all working hard to kind of push this design forward and get everything done. It's cool to see all the pieces, as the A team would say. I love it when a plan comes together.
Yeah.
that's kind of where we're at now,
Eating
right? The
cigar
plan.
when you say that. Are there any? I'm assuming all the changes between Gamma and Delta are fairly fine tuning, little things here and there. Like no big design changes that people be like,
Yeah, well,
wow.
some more kind of architecture changes because we found this company in Italy that does these kind of supercar carbon fiber composites, but they do it in a very manufacturable way, and it's kind of just catching on to how cool this technology could be.
Oh, cool.
But it's very much so just stamping out parts. You put a carbon fiber and thermoset resin goo into a waffle iron, and you stamp the waffle iron down, and 10 minutes later you have a big Aptera part. It's kind of the
Nice.
cheapest long-term way that we think we can build these parts, and it helps us scale. You can build hundreds of thousands of parts out of each of these molds, and it happens really, really quickly. So, because of that method, you can do things with their process that you couldn't do with like the green vehicle you see behind me. You can put structural ribs on the back. You can put fasteners in the part. You can do a lot of cool things that we couldn't do with this composite. So some of the design effort has been kind of changing how we think about the parts and how we affix things to the parts. So we kind of had to re-architect some of the parts. Cosmetically, though, it looked very similar. All those are kind of, the underpinnings of the vehicle. So I think cosmetically, same profile, same length, same width, same aerodynamic shape. The, the, the the interior looks, very, very much so the same. It's just some of those kind of how we think about the composite parts, and then suppliers coming back to us and saying, yeah, we don't make a bracket like that. You're going to have to use our bracket, or you're going to have to pay us $100,000. We're like, yeah, we don't want to pay $100,000. So we'll just figure out how to use your bracket.
Makes sense. So you're looking at end of next year or so before you start delivering?
Unfortunately, everything's funding dependent. So
Okay.
if we have any people of means that want to invest in Aptera,
Oh, here we go. Here's the pitch.
it's invest.aptera.us. But once we're funded for production, it's kind of 9 months to get the manufacturing train rolling. So we got to get the equipment in, we got to commission the equipment, we got to run kind of test cycles to build everything. So that's kind of a 9-month window. So if we get major funding by the end of the year, then 9 months later we're cranking out Apteras.
It's probably gonna be one of those slowly and then suddenly kind of things.
Yeah, Sandy Munro and Pablo are brilliant VP of manufacturing. They're of the accord that like a lot of other companies have made the mistake of starting slowly and then trying to ramp up. Let's build 1 vehicle a day, and then 2 vehicles a day, and then 5 vehicles a day. The problem is when you hire people to build 1 vehicle a day, and then you tell people, hey, we're going to increase production to 4 vehicles a day, their head explodes. I can't build 4 vehicles a day. It's a pain in the ass just building 1 vehicle a day.
Yeah.
So, we're buying the equipment, we're scaling up for manufacturer, like with these partners in Italy, CPC, to build 40 vehicles a day. So it's not kind of a trickle and then more of a trickle and scale. It's we're going to start manufacture, and within 3 months we're going to be building 40 vehicles a day. And then once we get used to that, we're going to put in a second shift so we can build 80 vehicles a day.
Gotcha.
So hopefully that'll happen, less than a year later from when we start production.
That's cool.
But that's the goal: is get into production, buy all the equipment for that, hire all the people, train them to build 40 vehicles a day, and then just start building 40 vehicles a day.
Just try to get the scale right from day one.
Yeah, get the supply chain lined up. You need 40 front suspension modules coming in a day. You need 40 bodies coming in a day. You need the solar factory to make 40 solar panels a day, and the battery pack line has to be producing 40 battery packs a day, and that's what keeps you ticking along.
God, that's a lot of juggling. Can't even imagine. Well, in all your off time, what else you got going on in your life? Are you like got any TV shows you're watching? Any books you're reading, or anything non-car related that you can put any brain cells toward?
I wish that I had more time for the House of Dragon and other shows that are out there, but I don't. I am engulfed in Aptera fun. I peel myself off every once in a while to delve into the world of supercomputing and how it's enhancing our lives. And I got into computational fluid dynamics. We built one of the world's largest supercomputing clusters here at Aptera to do that kind of work. So I'm really interested in how computers do that kind of work. From from simulating the universe and how we think stars form and stuff like that, to particle physics. I think it's just amazing that we have the computational tools to analyze stuff like that, and it's giving us answers that we could never conceive of, in our puny little human brains. And I think it'll tell us, a lot about, how the universe works and how some of these particle physics things works, before we have kind of the ability to test for them, because you see, like the, testing at CERN and other places, those are multi-decade projects. And my eagerness to understand the universe as it isn't patient enough to wait for that. So yeah, that's usually when I geek out online, I search for those, kind of how supercomputing is making the world and the universe a better place type stuff.
Yeah, that's cool.
It's worth 10, 20 minutes a night.
Yeah. Sometimes I look at what's going on with the quantum computing and stuff. It feels like when they started talking about quantum computing at first, it was like, oh my God, they're gonna have all the answers to everything and it's gonna create God or something, and then it was kind of like, actually, it's just really good at very specific use cases.
Yeah.
And it's not like an everything kind of computer. But it's still kind of neat that's something
very basic calculator that can do infinite calculations in an instant.
Yeah, that kind of thing.
Wow. How to use it. Yeah, it's interesting how our kind of understanding of matter and particle physics has changed over the last decade, and that some things, exist and don't exist all at the same time, and somehow they're intertwined, but we don't know why. But it's predictable, and as long as it's predictable, we can use it. So I think it's it's a lot like probably the early days of understanding electricity. They didn't understand why. They didn't understand that electricity was really a field pushing electrons, and that's why these things happen. They just understood that they could have electricity do something. You could shock shit. You could turn on lights. They had no understanding why, and I imagine that's a lot like what's going to happen in quantum computing. Is we don't have an understanding of the why yet, but over time we will, and it will greatly assist in our mastery of that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, you get into the quantum stuff. You get existential real quick. Actually, I'm working on one about the Nobel Prize from this last year that proves that reality is not locally real. And I had to look up what that meant. It's not as crazy as it sounds, but it's basically saying that Einstein was wrong about some things. So
if the universe is expanding faster than the speed of light, and the things at the edge of our universe are traveling at the speed of light, but time doesn't exist at the speed of light, and our universe will continue to expand, eventually we'll be traveling at the speed of light, even though we may not know that, and our time may just stop. Moment. We don't know. We don't know when that moment.
Bleeding out the ears. Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, it's I think the things that are happening beyond our perception are terribly interesting, and we may never know in our lifetimes. But some of these supercomputing tools may give us a little look into things that could be beyond. So
yeah,
very cool. Very cool time to be alive.
What is it's a, what's the word I'm looking for? A damnation or something? It's like, may you live in interesting times.
Yeah.
I forget the right way it's said, but yeah, it's a good thing and it's a bad thing, and it's definitely interesting if nothing else. But that's what I get to cover on my channel. Yay.
Well, you're doing the Lord's work. I mean, breaking down complex science and topics and making it interesting for people is an amazing thing. And it's I think through education, a lot of people will live better lives, and you're doing that work.
Oh, thank you. I like to think that if I can get myself to understand it, then if I can get a dummy like me to understand it, that I can get other people to maybe understand it. So the trick is, can I understand it?
It's a complex world. I mean, I saw a study now, that basically every decade our IQ is jumping 20 points or so.
I was reading something about that. Yeah.
That if you looked at people, 4 generations ago, you'd be like, wow, they're functionally, they're barely function. But now the world is so complex and it's so challenging that even from a young age, people are growing up, and it's solving complex problems is what we're good at. and we're just getting better and better. So you feeding knowledge to people and kind of helping them break down, the problems of the world. Your work will inspire somebody to make the world a better place, including me. So
I like to think so.
Yeah.
My dick jokes every once in a while just kind of helps the medicine go down, I guess. But
a good dick joke,
whatever works. Yeah,
inspiring.
That was from Mary Poppins, right? She said that. Yeah. Julie Andrews.
Yeah.
Well, dude, I appreciate this time. I was, we didn't really get a chance to talk at Fully Charged because you were like the belle of the ball. So it's cool to get to do this.
Well, I appreciate you having me. We appreciate the love for Aptera and what we're doing. If you have any questions, let me know. I'd love to talk again sometime as we progress, or you just have different topics. You want to talk about crickets more? I'm down. Let's go.
Hey, let's talk crickets. I would love to, next time I'm in San Diego, I'd love to take a drive in one.
Yeah, that'd be awesome, man. Anytime.
I didn't get to do it the last time, but maybe next time.
Yeah, we weren't letting anybody drive Gamma, and it actually just left to Italy, so it's not going to be back for a while.
That's a long drive.
Anyway, it's a long drive, but 1,000-mile range.
See, this is something you don't even say in your literature, that it drives across water. You can just
looks like a boat.
You heard it here first.
Like a boat.
Well, thanks, Chris. This is fun, and I'll be in touch.
Thanks, man.
Good luck with everything. All right, thanks again to Chris for hanging out with me. That was a lot of fun. And if you want to know more about this crazy future car he's building, you can go check out their website, aptera.us. That's aptera.us. And if you're really interested, maybe reserve a car. Grab a spot in line. It'll probably be a while because they're still working on it. But go for it. Now, before you go, since I'm apparently selling my wares today, you always see me in nerdy, fun t-shirts on the show. Well, you might not know that I actually do sell those shirts online at answerswithjoe.com/store. There's branded shirts with my logo on them, also posters, mugs, stickers, plus a lot of different fun and nerdy designs that have absolutely nothing to do with my logo. But, it might make a good gift for someone, somebody that's sciencey, nerdy. It's that time of year. Just saying. Plus, it does support the channel. So please go check it out. answerswithjoe.com/store. Have fun. Let me know what you think. This episode was produced by Kimmy Britt, edited by Bray Brown. I'm Joe Scott. You can find me at Answers with Joe pretty much everywhere on the socials. Of course, my YouTube channel is Answers with Joe. Anyway, thanks a lot for listening. Please do share this if you thought it was interesting, and a nice review on whatever podcast player you're using right now really does go a long way, and it's very much appreciated. But until next time, thanks. Have a good one. Now go out there and start some conversations of your own. Take care.